Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Katherine Kelly. I am a holistic health psychologist and soul healing specialist. And I do this Soul of Psychology series to help educate about how the soul shows up in mental health and physical health and social health, interpersonal health. And this Soul of Psychology piece that I want to do today is a little sticky for some people. And I've been asked this for years. So, what happens when you have a client that comes to you and they are saying that they're hearing some voices or they're hearing some messages, and as practitioners we are traditionally trained to think that that is some form of psychosis or there's some form of something wrong, with them, whether it's a bipolar kind of situation, a schizophrenic situation, some sort of psychotic situation. But the truth is there are individuals that do hear these voices or hear messages, and they can come from lots of different dimensions. So, being a psychologist, I've been doing some sort of mental health work for almost 38 years now, which again, when I think about is shocking. But I started really realizing the need to do soul work pretty early in my career and just delved into understanding spirituality in general and delved into understanding the soul in general. And over time, I started to, obviously integrate a whole lot of that into the work I do. Now, from a personal perspective, I started having spiritual messages all the way back to middle school. I did not know that, they were spiritual messages. It was just something when you are just living it, you don't really realize that this is something unique. Now, that really probably opened up for me after my father died. And my father died when I was barely 21 years old and had a very powerful experience the night that he died and realized that, okay, there was something opening up for me. There was something energetic opening. I was having these kinds of experiences where I could hear or foretell kind of what was about to happen. And then I started having more and more experiences where I was getting what I call signs from spirit or messages from spirit. Now, I'm going to tell my own stories first a little bit, and then I'm going to tell you some very key stories that are going to weave in for you. If you are a practitioner and this person has come to you saying, I'm hearing voices, or wow, I had this message, and instead of you kind of going cockeyed on them and going, okay, are these people losing it? It's really important for you to step back and go, okay, let me assess to see, is this a spiritual kind of thing or is this really a mental health kind of thing? It is extremely important to know the difference. And I'm going to give you some ways to understand that. Now, like I said, very, very young, I started having these experiences where I had very strong messages that really were undeniable in terms of what I should be listening to. And I could give you further back, but I'm going to give you a message that came very strongly when, right before I moved here to North Carolina. And I had been offered the job here. And it was one of those things where it was in April that I was offered the job. I was sitting at my kitchen table in Columbia, Missouri, where I was doing my postdoc in family medicine. And it was very quiet. I think it was a Saturday or Sunday. And I was sitting there with a pencil doing my taxes for that year. And I remember just in the back of my mind trying to make the decision, okay, should I take this job? Should I take this job? Because in my mind, I thought I would be moving back closer to Colorado. And yet this job was taking from me from Missouri, 1,700 miles away from my home. And so, I'm just doing my taxes, working these things out, which I did not enjoy, but got to do them. And in the back of my mind, like I said, I was saying, wow, okay, Emma, is this what I'm supposed to do? And I just remember thinking, gosh, am I making the wrong decision? And I said that several times in the back of my head until this huge voice came and said, you are not making the wrong decision. You have to go. I dropped my pencil and I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I've never had that happen before. So what do I make of that? And yet my gut, my soul told me, yeah, I'm right. This is right. I'm supposed to be doing this. How easily this job unfolded for me to take kind of now makes me understand that the whole path was paved for me to come here. But had I not really heard that very strong voice tell me, you have to go, you're not making the wrong decision, I'm not sure if I would have taken it. I was leaning toward it, but I'm not sure I would have. But that was like a no brainer at that point. Okay, I'm supposed to take this job. Now, after I moved here, I had several different experiences like that. I was at a retreat center and I was having these, what people call downloads, having these messages come very strongly. Several of them were in that same voice, that very strong, powerful voice. Over time, I started hearing other kinds of messages as I got to know what we in the spiritual world call spirit guides or angels or archangels or ascended masters. And that's a whole different story as far as what I'll explain at some point in video. But I just started having these experiences. I have had experiences with my deceased parents coming to me and having messages for me. I had experiences with my best friend's grandfather, who I never met. He passed away before I ever met my best friend when I was 14 when I met her. And he came to me at her new house here in North Carolina about 8 years ago, in the middle of the night. I woke up, this energy was standing there, and he had some messages for me, and I conveyed them to her the next morning. I said, "Hey, is this what your grandfather looked like?" And she said, "Yes. How do you know that?" So this is where the spiritual world can go if you are, again, grounded and stable enough and understand that this is spirit work that you're doing. This is not some hallucination you're having. But the reason I'm telling you personal stories is that I've had a lot of education. I've had a lot of additional training in terms of, spiritual training on top of all of my traditional, postgraduate training. And so I know I'm not losing it. But what happens when you have a patient coming to you or a client? I call them clients. I don't like to clinicalize the people I work with, so I actually call them clients. And what happens when you have someone come to you and say, "Oh, I'm hearing these things." Now, a lot of times the difference is if you're already working with them and you already know that they have some sort of psychosis, it's very possible that this is sort of a brain kind of thing. It's very possible that their chemistry is off and they need that to be rebalanced. However, it is also the case, and this is where you have to be very clear and very mindful of not dismissing some of the things that some of these people might hear. I think it is really important for you to step back and realize that we have times, some of us have times when we can hear our deceased relatives or we have messages from them. We could have spirit guides coming through. We could have energies coming through that are actually there to help us, and we are not compromised in a mental health kind of way. Now, I'm going to give you some examples of this to help you because, again, from a soul of psychology perspective, what I do is I teach people how the soul shows up behind the scenes, or in a way that basically to me makes perfect sense, but to people who have not been trained to understand the soul, they may not understand this. They may not get this. So several years ago, and I'm going to say this is probably 18 years ago, a client was referred to me by one of the physicians that I taught in the residency program when I was a professor there. And she was grieving her mother, and her mother had passed away about a year and a half, 2 years prior to the time that she came to me. And, she was still grieving. She was still a little depressed from everything. And she was, during the very first session, the intake, just kind of listening to her, asking the questions, talking to her about the relationship she had with her mom. And then at some point, I said, "Well, do you ever hear your mom or sense her around you?" And her eyes grew and she paused and she said, "Yes." And she was very tentative and hesitant about saying that. I said, "Well, tell me a little bit about that." And you could tell she was a little uncomfortable because she thought probably that I would think she was crazy. And basically, I just listened, and she said, "Yeah, there are times when I'm sitting in my living room, like watching TV or reading, and I hear her right behind me say something." I'm like, "Okay, what else?" And she said, "At times, I actually smell her perfume." And I'm like, "Okay, great." And she said as I was talking to her and she felt more comfortable because obviously I was receptive to this, she started opening up to some of the things that would happen in the house. And I kind of helped her see very quickly that I was okay with this because I could tell very quickly she was not psychotic. She was not losing her mind with anything. But I was helping her see that this is normal for people who can kind of bridge the world energetically, and probably for the sake of her kind of comfort was the reason why her mother's essence and energy was coming through and her spirit was coming through. What was interesting is she left that day. I didn't think anything about it. She came back about 2 weeks later for her follow-up session, and she said, Dr. Kelly, I feel so much better already. She said, I didn't know what to do with all of this. I felt like, okay, who experiences this? I didn't feel like I could talk to anybody about it. And so we launched into ways she could maybe sense the energy, or maybe ways she could tap into her mom's energy when she needed to for comfort or advice or something like that. And so we only met probably 5 or 6 times because I was just kind of teaching her a little bit how to be comfortable with herself in those situations. I, as a practiced psychologist for quite a while, knew immediately she was not hearing voices in a psychologically compromised way. She was hearing the spirit world. Now, there are tricky situations where basically you may have clients come to you and they are on that brink or on the edge of teetering with mental health kinds of concerns. And then you have to be much more uh, clear with the questions that you ask, because it is very possible that some of what they're hearing is not actually the spirit world. Some of it could be the way their brain is working. And you have to ask mostly, what are the kinds of messages that are coming through? What are the kinds of issues that you're hearing? Or what are kind of the messages in terms of, are they helpful? Are they scary? And so you have to kind of do a little bit more assessment, because there are people who do hallucinate, and it's usually scary kinds of messages or scary kinds of experiences that they have with people that have passed. So you do have times where you have to be extremely careful. Now, I have had people contact me asking me to do Akashic record readings or past life readings. And I would ask a few questions. And I have had people tell me that they have to figure out a way to do the readings because they are currently committed to a inpatient psychiatric hospital. I immediately say, okay, I am not willing to do that. I'm not comfortable doing that, because they have to get that cleared up. They have to get themselves grounded from that perspective before I would be comfortable working with them as a psychologist, because obviously they do have things, or I should say, work with them from a soul healing perspective, because part of it is that you have to have professional boundaries as well. You have to have an ethical understanding of where your line is. And if someone contacts me from a soul healing perspective and really is already undergoing a lot of pretty serious psychiatric care, I'm probably not going to do an Akashic record reading or do some sort of work with them. However, it is still entirely possible that someone who is having a psychiatric concern is still in tune with the spirit side. So that is why I train practitioners. That's why I work with coaches and other and educators and administrators to help them understand the difference, so that if they are working with someone, that basically they know where to funnel this client. They know where to funnel a person to, is it a psychiatric situation, or is it, no, we need to go explore this kind of spiritual situation and see how it's there to help you, and is there to help kind of enhance your experience of life. That is probably the quickest litmus test or barometer to figure out if this person is actually hallucinating, or basically it's a spirit world, is to find out, is the experience they're having, number one, benefiting them in some way, and or scaring them in some way. Because pretty quickly, if it is a voice or an energy that is scaring them, it is probably something more psychiatric. However, I will also add that there are some dark energies out there. There are some dark energies that need to be cleared from the energetic field on Earth before that person could feel comfortable. We all know that there are haunted houses out there. We all know that there are energies that are kind of stuck in between worlds and they can't get to the other side. And so there would not be all these TV shows. There would not be all of these horror movies. There wouldn't be all of these things unless it was possible. But from a soul of psychology perspective, I really want to have you think, as a coach or a practitioner or an educator or an administrator, where is the line? Where is the line for this? Because in order to help someone, if they are actually having some sort of actual connection with the spirit world, basically spirit world or even greater world, basically God, angels, all of the kind of external layers that are out there, if they're having those, you don't want to dismiss those. You don't want to squash that kind of energy if they are helpful. It's just that you have to educate yourself as a practitioner yourself in order to figure out which way this might go. I could tell you thousands of stories about how many people I've worked with to help them understand what was different. And I only give you a couple examples. The person who is grieving her mother is very common. It is not unusual at all for someone who has recently passed to show up from the spirit world in order to either say, "Hey, I'm okay," or to guide that person in some way and comfort that person in some way. And it is also not unusual for those heavy, darker energies to be there that might be taking over. And I'll tell you, I've had a few of those recently where I've had a couple clients, soul healing clients come to me mostly to educate them to say, what is going on? I feel this dark energy. I can feel them kind of moving in. And so, again, I have to be very quick on my feet to make sure, okay, is this a psychotic thing or is this really a dark energy that's coming in, so I can guide them for how to remove it or how to release that kind of energy that has become attached to them. I know this stuff happens. I have experienced it. I've seen it. I've worked with a ton of people. And from a soul of psychology perspective, I just wanted to put this video out to give you a taste of some things to think about in the case that you have something come up as a practitioner that you're uncertain about and you don't know what to do with. So if you do have that situation and you need my help distinguishing which is which, give me a call, figure out how to contact me, go to my website, and I'm very happy to help guide you through that because, again, I want to help people understand the soul side of the world, and the soul side of psychology is a very important part to start understanding in order to help people more. So again, I hope you have a wonderful day. I think this is one of those topics that can get a little sticky but juicy at the same time. And I love helping people understand the difference. So if there is something I can do to help you, reach out. In the meantime, have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.